Deceived by Pharmakeia 4, A Cursed Harvest. This is the expanded, updated second edition, which is so much better than the first edition. Many stories added, rewritten almost entirely. Okay, I am John Everblessed. Hello. Thank you for watching this video. Now, most all my other presentations are based on history that I'm familiar with, history that I'm interested in. This one, however, came out of nowhere. I had no preconceived ideas or conclusions on this topic until one day, just out of the blue, I asked my wife, "Do you think organ donations and transplants are God's will?" Then the topic just began to grow inside my head. The whole thing just kind of took on a life of its own. Thoughts just started showing up and settling in. So after a while, it just felt like I was supposed to present on this topic. Ever happen to you? I started researching, and the answers just sort of fell at my feet as soon as I started researching. It was easy and simple and obvious truth. I've never had an easier presentation than this one. When I started to write it all out, it took me just 2 days. And after that, it was just fine-tuning. Most of the time, my presentations take about 6 weeks. This one was special. When I thought I was finished, my wife suggested that I ask God if there's anything else he wanted to have me put into it. So I did. I asked God, and within 2 hours, I had another whole section of content on blood transfusions, and I just had an interview with a local expert on it. Very surprising. And I had another story that I didn't even know I was going to have within those 2 hours. Now that blood transfusion part is a very important section here, and it's all biblical too. So here we are. This presentation is the image that showed up when the dots were connected in my head. All right, we start with a true story. It's kind of a painful story, but it's exceedingly important. And this story, these types of stories are common, and it's been happening for decades. All right, here it is. This is by Paul E. Robinson, the father of that tall man you see there. The title is "My Son's Story Must Be Told." He was a young man. He had healthy organs, which means he was an ideal organ donor in the eyes of the merchants of Pharmakeia. This is an ominous story, by the way. All right. At 8:42 p.m. on November 3, 2015, a young Arizona man on a mountain bike was struck from behind by a car. This man was my son, Paul Jr., or PJ. 911 was called. A unit of the Phoenix Fire Department arrived on the scene within minutes. PJ was unconscious with labored breathing, blood in his mouth, and cuts on his eyebrows. No ID was found, and his fingerprints were not on file. So the sheriff's office reported he was, quote, an unidentified male thought to be in his mid-20s. There was a question mark under ethnicity, and his language was marked unknown. Uh-oh, we're being set up here. This led to speculation that my son might be a homeless, illegal alien. My African-American son was bright-skinned, so it was no great leap to think he was Hispanic. Paul Jr. arrived at the hospital emergency room at 9:15. Within 15 minutes, the organ donor network had been contacted about a possible donor. Worth noting is that PJ's blood type was O positive, a match with every other blood type, considered gold for the donor network. misdiagnosed and denied proper treatment. When Paul Jr. arrived at the ER, his vital signs were high, normal, and he was breathing on his own. The records shows the pain my son endured because they intubated him and inserted a chest tube without the benefit of sedation or pain medication. Both his heart rate and his blood pressure rose drastically, signs of great distress, which likely caused a detrimental rise of intracranial pressure, increasing the damage to his brain. The first intubation failed, so he was intubated again at 10:30. I think they sacrificed his brain to maintain his body for organ donations. Neither his subdural hematoma, bleeding increased pressure on the brain, nor has his lacerated spleen was surgically treated. They left it alone. Also, they did not monitor his intracranial pressure. You always monitor the intracranial pressure on this. It's protocol in a level 1 trauma center, but they did not do this. The neurosurgeon, who did not examine Paul Jr. for close to 2 hours after his arrival at the ER, stated that my son had, quote, no brainstem activity and no signs of neurological function. A finding that would lead to Paul Jr. being treated as though he were brain dead. Paul Jr.'s reactions, however, contradicted the neurosurgeon's so-called diagnosis. In fact, one doctor recorded that Paul Jr. had positive pupil response. That's good. A positive pupil response to mannitol, a drug that reduces intracranial pressure, and a positive gag reflex. That's good too. 2 signs of neurological function, proper function. He's not brain dead, in other words. The next day, November 4, officials identified my son as Paul D. Robinson Jr., age 34, and located me. I have an extensive medical background as a clinical specialist in the Army for 6 years and a nurse for 20 years. From the first, I had strong misgivings about how my son's case was handled. I suspect that being profiled as a homeless, illegal alien in his 20s influenced the decision not to treat him properly. A nightmare. Paul Jr. was hospitalized from November 3 to November 1, almost a month. The hospital experience was a nightmare for my wife, Marzi, and me. On November 12, a doctor who I felt was very deceptive called to inform us that they were placing a do not resuscitate, DNR, order on my son. This was against our wishes and therefore illegal. Furthermore, no EEG was performed until November 17. An EEG is a brain scan. And only then when I insisted it be done. We also wanted a second CT scan as we felt these additional tests would have shown the medical team's narrative to be wrong. The MRI report from November 8th was mysteriously missing when I reviewed Paul Jr.'s medical records after his death. Yeah, the chain of evidence is linking itself longer and longer. A breathing test was done on November 28, after which the doctor predicted our son would continue to breathe for more than 90 minutes once removed from the ventilator. A nurse said he could live for days. Based on this information, we made the very difficult decision to have the ventilator removed on December 1. If Paul Jr. continued to breathe, we would move him to a skilled nursing facility. If not, we would agree to organ donation. That was a mistake. On November 30, another apnea test revealed that Paul Jr. could breathe on his own. Hey, that's really, really good. Meaning he could not be declared brain dead for the purpose of organ donations. Now, that was on November 30. The morning of December 1, according to billing and medical records, PJ was given morphine, Ativan, and potassium chloride, a drug that, when used inappropriately, can slow or stop the heartbeat. Those 3 drugs, by the way, were a deadly cocktail. There was no medically indicated reason to give Paul Jr. these drugs. For example, potassium chloride is used to treat low blood levels of potassium. Paul Jr.'s blood levels were normal. These drugs were administered without our consent or knowledge. Well, that's no surprise. I believe that they were used to ensure that our son would not breathe when the ventilator was removed. You remember COVID? You know the stories. You've heard them. This is no longer a surprise. This is still the lion's den. Paul, quote, died, unquote, in my arms as he struggled to breathe. Of course, it's what they gave him. A deadly deception. I was told and believed my son was deceased. The expiration document stated patient was pronounced dead at the bedside and then was taken to the OR for DCD. Well, DCD stands for donation after circulatory death, or donation after cardiac death. DCD is a way to get organs from a patient who exhibits neurological functions and therefore does not qualify for a DBD, donation after brain death. Paul Jr. was taken to the operating room around 7:40 p.m. Records indicate that he received morphine at 8:05. Well, now, why would a dead man need morphine? He was given a blood transfusion at 8:35. What? He was given a blood transfusion at 8:35? Why? Additionally, 2 powerful pain medications, morphine and fentanyl, as well as the anti-anxiety drug Ativan, were not discontinued until 1:19 a.m. the next morning. The disturbing inference is that PJ's circulatory system was still functioning and that he was resuscitated for the purpose of keeping his organs as healthy as possible for donation. Premeditated murder. Let's continue. From the beginning, I felt like PJ was considered the property of the hospital. Oh, I felt that. Oh, yes, that is not new. Thus, an adversarial relationship developed between the medical team and me. I fought to get the truth and the treatment my son needed and deserved. I had to fight. I saw my beloved son, but the doctors only seemed to see healthy organs for the taking. For 3 straight days, scores of doctors, nurses, and support personnel were brought into meetings to put pressure on us to donate our son's organs. I gave in. I should have fought harder. How do I forgive myself? I believe that, had he received timely, proper treatment, Paul Robinson Jr. would probably still be alive. His story must be told and retold as a warning to others. Don't be deceived when asked to donate a loved one's organs. Say no. Editor's note, and I'm not the editor. There is so much more that could have been written about this case. For example, the falsification of PJ's medical records by the neurosurgeon and how HIPAA privacy regulations were disregarded and violated. That medical facility and their doctors were not interested in saving lives. If they were, they would have tried to save the life of this young man. It was about money, and they were willing to kill for it, just as they were willing to kill for it during the COVID wars. If you were awake and paying attention during the COVID wars, you understand this. Revelation 18:23, for by thy sorceries were all nations deceived. Revelation 18:4, and I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues. Proverbs 14:12 says, there is a way which seemeth right unto a man, but the end thereof are the ways of death. When our all-knowing, all-powerful, loving God created mankind, he gave the body the wisdom to know what should be in the body and what should not be in the body, and the ability to naturally reject and eject those things that do not belong in the body. We call it the immune system. But the body's ability to reject things that shouldn't be there had a much higher purpose. God hid that higher purpose from us for nearly 6,000 years. It is only now, in this modern day age of surgery and pharmakeia, that the immune system's greater purpose may be seen and understood. God instructed the immune system to reject anything that does not belong in the body, including someone else's organs. It was a profound safeguard against great wickedness in these end times right now. That immune system prevented evil men, organized crime syndicates, the medical mafias, and the merchants of pharmakeia from taking or stealing organs from one person to traffic it to another. It was to prevent kidnapping people for their organs to sell to the highest bidders. It was to prevent the poor from selling their organs to the rich, or from the rich stealing organs. Yet the merchants of pharmakeia, the scientists, the medical fraternities, the medical mafias, and the physicians of this world all made the decision to trust in their own pseudoscience and to override and ignore God's embedded safeguards and his natural law and transplant organs from one living human being to another. This is enabled by what now has proven to be one of the darkest of all sorceries ever created. A witch's brew that would suppress the immune system to prevent the body from naturally rejecting a foreign organ in the body. And that potion would have to be regularly administered to keep the body from rejecting the organ, thus chaining forever the user to that sorcery for the rest of his unnatural life. It would enable the proliferation of many diseases due to a suppressed immune system, and ironically, a diminished lifespan. A perfect demonic storm. And they got paid for it. The doctors did. Those sorceries opened the floodgates, and now, as expected, evil men, organized crime, the medical fraternities, and the merchants of pharmakeia now traffic organs legally or illegally, even if it is by deception, medical manipulation, or murder. Seemingly endless documentaries, videos, photos, and horror stories about organ trafficking abound on the World Wide Web. Everything God intended to prevent was made possible by the merchants of Pharmakeia in the name of benevolent medical science. Revelation 18:23 now has a much darker level of meaning to us. For by thy sorceries, Pharmakeia, were all nations deceived. Babylon's immunosuppressant drugs deceive people into believing that it's okay to kill the helpless for their organs, that it's for the greater good, and that it's normal to use another person's organs. It tricks them into chaining themselves to Pharmakeia for the rest of their lives, and never-ending health problems from a suppressed immune system and side effects from the drugs. It deceives people into violating both moral and natural law. Thou shalt not kill. And he that killeth any man shall surely be put to death. Leviticus 24:17. Organs from a dead body will not work for transplanting. Organs must be carved out of a living human being whose heart is pumping, whose organs are still working. A human who still has the breath of life within him. To cut out organs from a living human being is murder. God has given no mortal man the right to take another man's organs. The person who receives such an organ is a partaker of that murder. Organ harvesting is an egregious violation of God's moral law. The drugs which enable this perversion commence punishing the recipient at once. The violation of God's natural law always results in suffering and death. So, clearly, organ transplants have never been God's will for mankind. The world's culture of death has been killing helpless unborn babies in the name of women's reproductive rights for decades. So why not the helpless in a coma as well? Human sacrifice is still a regular demonic practice. Only now it's done in the name of benevolent medical science. This culture of death is not new. We were raised with it. We are surrounded with it. We are so familiar with it that we have lost the sense of its terrible enormity. We are to live by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God, not by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of fallen mortal man, and especially not the medical men. But he was going to die anyway, they say. All right? But if you kill him first by having a team of butchers serve up his organs on a platter for you while he's still living, you have become guilty of his barbarous murder. The whole idea of organ harvesting is satanic in nature and consequence. Has God told us that it is okay to kill the helpless as long as it is done in the name of saving lives? Perhaps John 16:2 has an unexpected application to organ trafficking. It says, "The time cometh that whosoever killeth you will think that he doeth God service." It has always been a vital part of God's plan for the redemption of man that we intercede in prayer and action for the sick and care for them as long as life shall last. Not carve them up for parts and kill them. Shutting off life support on hopeless patients? What about that? Well, I have a story for that. I have a friend. She told me that her father was 78 years old, had a brain bleed, and an operation which resulted in a stroke. There was no real hope for recovery. He was unresponsive, his blood pressure was very low, and his brain was not receiving enough oxygen, even on 100% oxygen and a BiPAP breathing machine. The family was told that if the doctors couldn't get their father under control, that he would have to be placed on a ventilator. Now, since my friend was the oldest of 4 siblings, the doctors gave the decision to her of what to do for her father. Janet's brother wanted every possible thing done to keep him alive. Janet's 2 sisters wanted to take him off all life support measures. Given his seemingly hopeless situation, Janet did not want to add a ventilator. Yet neither did she want to take him off his current life support measures because she considered that to be the same as killing him. Yeah, a BiPAP machine is a temporary external breathing machine. A ventilator is a long-term, not permanent, a long-term solution where they stick a tube down the throat and add a breathing machine to that. So that's what she was talking about. My friend's only option was to leave it to God. Officially, that's important, officially. So she prayed that God would take this dilemma upon himself. He can heal or he can lay to rest. God honored that prayer and took control. 3 days later, the Lord laid her father to rest. In 1 Peter 5:7, we are invited to cast all our cares upon God. I suspect that God never intended that we humans ever be forced to make such a choice as pulling the plug on a loved one. God says, I kill and I make alive. I wound and I heal. Deuteronomy 32:39. Donating a kidney. This is from a lady named Mirza. She says, back in 1990, I donated one of my kidneys to my older brother, James Pitchy. I thought being his sibling, it would be a perfect match. Boy, was I wrong. He had to take meds for life, which he took for 5 years. After that, he gave up taking it. It gave him so many side effects, and they were large pills. It hurt his stomach so much. So the kidney was lost and taken out, and he went back to dialysis. It is very painful torture. In dialysis, he lasted 4 years, and he died while sleeping. I thank God I'm still living with 1 kidney, but I live with low salt consumption. No one is entitled to anyone else's organs. No one should ever ask. It's only trading one misery for many other miseries. What? Know ye not that your body is the temple of the Holy Ghost, which is in you, which ye have of God? And ye are not your own. For ye are bought with a price. Therefore glorify God in your body and in your spirit, which are God's. 1 Corinthians 6:19-20. Organ donation cards. Never, ever sign an organ donation card. That has proven to be a very dangerous thing when in the hands of godless doctors and a corrupt medical system. Not signing a donor card is not necessarily good enough. Every state maintains an organ donor registry listing people who have agreed to be organ donors, either by driver's license or by signing an organ donor card. No state, according to Halo's research, has a registry for those who do not want to be organ donors. Therefore, it's up to you to protect yourself. Sign and carry this wallet card with you. I refuse to be an organ donor. Brain death. This next article is used by permission by Life Issues Institute. The article was entitled "Man Wakes Up as His Organs Were About to Be Harvested" by Bradley Matts, October 24, 2024. Here's the story. This story made national headlines, and it found its way around the world. I did a search on it. It's everywhere, all these different countries. You may be aware of a Kentucky man waking up as they were about to harvest his organs for donation. It's good news that Anthony Thomas Hoover, TJ, is alive, but the circumstances surrounding this event, as reported by multiple news sources, are horrifying. Donna Rohrer, TJ's sister, was oblivious to what had happened to her brother and would never have known the truth if not for a whistleblower coming forward. At the time, Nicoletta Martin was employed by Kentucky Organ Donor Affiliates, CODA, K-O-D-A, and was in the surgical suite that day. She later resigned because of TJ's case and testified before Congress in September 2024 about what she saw. TJ suffered a cardiac arrest and was rushed to Kentucky's Baptist Health Richmond, a hospital 30 miles away. His brain suffered from oxygen deprivation. That same day, doctors told Donna and other family members there were no reflexes, no brain activity, no brain waves. Hold on, folks. The following day, the family agreed to remove TJ from life support. Since TJ was registered organ donor, the organ procurement team went into action, testing his organs for harvesting. The morning of the intended retrieval of TJ's organs, he had woken up during a catheterization of his heart. He woke up, but the family was not informed. Instead, they sedated him again. During the hospital honor walk, the ceremonial moving of an organ donor to the surgical suite, Donna noticed TJ's eyes were opening and that he was tracking with his eyes. But she was told by staff that it was only reflexes, a normal event. Do you believe that? The family felt they were not qualified to doubt the medical team. Doubt, doubt, doubt. Nicoletta Martin gave a first-hand account of what she witnessed in the surgical suite that day. TJ was thrashing around on the table, trying to pull his tube out and pushing their hands away, crying and shaking his head no. He knew what was going on. Natasha Miller, who was there to preserve the organs, said he was crying visibly. About an hour into the process, the doctor came out and told the family TJ had woken up and that he refused to harvest his organs. Nicoletta then heard the CODA coordinator call out to the CODA admin, quote, "You will find another doctor to carry out this case. If you don't, you're going to get fired." No wonder this ended up in a congressional hearing. If this scenario was correct, and the medical team had proceeded with a new surgeon, they would almost certainly have been complicit in committing murder by organ donation. And none of this information had been shared with the family until Nicoletta came forward. In September 2024, Dr. Seth Karp, surgeon-in-chief at Vanderbilt University, said that it was not infrequent that questions came up about the life or death status of organ donors. The problem is we've got 40 years where there has been no oversight at all of OPOs, organ procurement organizations. Organ donation involves significant amounts of money for the medical community. The hospital benefits from billing for harvesting the organs, and there's a double benefit if it is able to also bill for transplanting them into waiting patients. Evidence is mounting that the lucrative business of organ donation may be enticing medical staff and hospitals to cross the line in taking some lives while allegedly claiming to be saving others. If so, the subjective definition of determining, quote, brain death, unquote, is given them cover. All right, that's the end of that story. Here's another article from Australia, Aussie News Tonight, April 28, 2025. The title was Brain Death. Are we getting it wrong? In operating rooms across the world, including here in Australia, a chilling phenomenon is prompting urgent questions. When brain-dead patients lie on the table to undergo organ harvesting surgery, in about 75% of cases, they make spontaneous defensive movements. 75%. This was known. Oh, people. Thy leaders have caused thee to err. Witnesses report arms snapping protectively over chests, legs kicking, bodies arching, even patients sitting upright and grabbing at the surgical staff. Some make guttural, choking noises. Their blood pressure and heart rate spike. It's a sight so disturbing that some surgical assistants have quit the profession altogether, unable to cope with the horror. It's murder, folks. This reaction is known as, well, that's called the Lazarus reflex. Officially, doctors describe these movements as spinal reflexes, unconscious reactions triggered by the spinal cord, supposedly with no input from a functioning brain. But many are starting to ask, can a truly dead person sit up, grab someone, and fight back? Man, we humans take a long time to learn our lessons. Cursed is the man who places his trust in man. Continuing on with this article, a young anesthetist attending an organ removal for the first time learned the hard way. When he questioned why anesthesia was necessary for a dead patient, his senior shot back, "How do you know that for sure?" The moment left him and many others shaken. The German Foundation for Organ Transplantation, DSO, states that anesthesia during organ removal isn't needed to suppress consciousness or prevent pain. Still, they recommend calming donors with opiates or muscle relaxants to avoid spikes in blood pressure and involuntary movements. But again, why would a dead body need drugs to relax or medication to manage blood pressure? This is barbaric. Simple questions beg simple answers. What dead person needs anesthesia? What dead person shows defensive responses? What dead person's heart races under stress? These observations challenge the prevailing assumption that brain death equals true death. Instead, growing numbers of doctors argue that brain death marks just one stage in the dying process, not its completion. If the kidneys fail, we don't call someone kidney death and give up. We treat them. When the brain stops working, it's damaged, but not necessarily dead. argue critics of current organ harvesting practices, and disturbingly, there are now documented cases of brain-dead patients who later regained consciousness. Oh, the madness. Continuing on, some leading transplant experts admit that it's impossible to prove that brain-dead patients have no sense of pain or awareness, which raises a deeply uncomfortable moral question. If we cannot guarantee they don't feel pain, why are we proceeding with invasive organ removal procedures without full anesthesia? Didn't I say this was barbaric? The bottom line, more and more experts are sounding the alarm. Brain death may not be real death. And before we take organs, we might need to start asking much harder questions. Well, he's being nice and tactful. No. This is life or death. This is murder. It has always been murder. It has always broken natural law and violated moral law. A donor must always be alive to have his organs harvested. The following are selected quotes excerpted from the Lineker Quarterly, Volume 66, Number 1, Article 5, February 1999, Brain Death is False, by Paul A. Byrne? I don't know, Bernie and George M. Rinkowski. One is a doctor, and I believe one is a clergy. Neither death nor clarifying the falseness of brain death is a matter of trivial pursuit. It ought not to be a matter of following trends, doing what is popular, or the procurement of organs for transplantation. A major question to ask is the person dead? If the answer is no, then the person is alive and must be treated as such. If we do not know the answer, then we are not free to remove organs or carry out research that will kill the person if alive. That's what they're doing. If the answer is yes, then the question is, well, which set of criteria was used to make the determination of death or brain death? This is still the article. Brain-related criteria are not based on data that would be valid for any truly scientific purpose. The Harvard criteria were published without any patient data, and there were no references to basic science reports. Basic. The Minnesota criteria evolved from a study of 25 patients. An EEG was done on only 9 of these patients. 2 of the 9 had biologic activity at the time of brain death. Their conclusion? No longer is it necessary for the neurosurgeon to use the EEG in making a determination of death. Hardly scientifically valid. The British criteria also do not include the EEG. How convenient. It was reported in the British Medical Journal that the doctors in Great Britain were considerably influenced by the doctors in Minnesota who do not require the EEG. The NIH criteria were derived from a study known as the Collaborative Study. In 1977, the NIH criteria were recommended for a larger clinical trial, which still has not been done. More than 30 sets of criteria had been published by 1978. 30 sets! Different criteria altogether. One set published more recently classifies references into categories of 1, 2, or 3, according to significance. All right? Most significant would be those in category 1, but not even one reference is in this category. Half of the references are in the least significant category, 3. There are many more sets published of which a physician A hospital or a transplant center is free to use any one of these sets. Thus, a patient could be declared dead by one set, but not another set of criteria. This ought to be the source of very great alarm. Okay, let's take a pause here from this article for a moment. Let's think about what that could mean for you or your families. It means that, yes, we may be justifiably alarmed that if we find ourselves or a loved one in a coma, that the doctors can arbitrarily pronounce brain death on you and your loved one with no accountability. Remember, folks, what goes around comes around. And yes, hospitals and doctors receive payment for organ transplants. But it is illegal for donors to receive payment. Hospitals can receive payment from private insurers and Medicare for organ transplants. A single operation can earn a hospital and its doctors tens of thousands of dollars. Money is a powerful motivation for godless men and medical institutions. We need to be very careful what we endorse. Because if you endorse this activity for others, then you are endorsing it for your own family if they find themselves in this situation. It's called karma. Yes, I know. The article continues, a person ought not to be evaluated as a commodity that is marketable. The fictitious application or intrusion of the idea of brain death is a planned falseness to intrude on the life of the person in order to do the evil of murder by organ transplantation. The autonomy of the person is violated by the evil of organ transplantation. This evil violates the basic rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And that's the end of that article. Now, next we go to a 3.5-minute video. It's the story of a coma patient who was awake and aware the whole time. And they tried to harvest her organs.
I was unable to move, to speak, to open my eyes. I was what they call locked in. But I was fully conscious and aware of what was going on around me. There was one nurse I remember very well. She would speak to me every time she was in the room and let me know what she was doing, why she was there. She called me by name. There was another nurse, I came to recognize her footsteps and the little sounds that she would make, but she never spoke to me until one day I heard her voice. Would somebody come in here and help me move this thing? She called me this thing. I was a piece of meat. I was a burden. Time was hard to judge. I had awake times and asleep times. And when I was awake, I understood everything that was going on. But I wasn't always awake. I did have sleep time. And one of the awake times, I heard multiple footsteps coming into the room. And one male voice saying, this one's a sad case. Young woman, 2 small children at home. Her husband is being completely unreasonable. If he would just sign the forms, so many people could benefit from her organs. And I thought, you can't have my organs. I need my organs. There was another voice spoke up and said, Doctor, is it appropriate to talk like this in front of the patient? He said, hello, she's brain dead. She can't hear anything. She doesn't understand anything. There's nothing there. She only has about a 1% chance of coming out of this coma. And if she does, she'll be a vegetable. It was less than a week later I came out of the coma. I'm not an expert on on at what point is a person truly dead. But I don't believe that brain death is true death. However, I do think that there are cases of people who simply will not recover from brain injury. But that brain injury is not necessarily the same as death. And even if the brain is not functioning, if they're able to breathe on their own and they're not respirator dependent, then their brain is still functioning. There is no true standard for diagnosing brain death. It's very subjective. One doctor's opinion of brain death is different than another. You cannot necessarily trust a diagnosis of brain death as being truly dead.
So, what would God have us do for loved ones in a coma? When they are in a hospital, we cannot come in and do treatments or give vitamin C or drink charcoal water. It's the lions who rule the lion's den. So what does God expect us to do when we're so restricted? Well, Isaiah 8:19 says, "Should not a people seek unto their God?" James 5:13-16 says, "Is any among you afflicted? Let him pray. Is any merry? Let him sing psalms. Is any sick among you? Let him call for the elders of the church, and let them pray over him, anointing him with oil in the name of the Lord. And the prayer of faith shall save the sick, and the Lord shall raise him up. And if he have committed sins, they shall be forgiven him. Confess your faults one to another, and pray one for another, that ye may be healed. The effectual, fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much." Health and healing has always been a spiritual matter. When you neglect to offer prayer for the sick, and you deprive them of great blessings, for angels of God are waiting to minister to these souls in response to your petitions. We need to get right with God. For example, a Catholic woman awakened from coma when biblically anointed by faithful Adventists. Here's the quote. "I had a friend, a coworker from my job, who had a sinus operation, and something went wrong during the operation that left her in a coma. She was in a coma for a long time. My mother and I decided to see her, so we spoke to our pastor, a Seventh-day Adventist. He told us we would go the following Sabbath, but we were to pray all week, preparing ourselves. That's important. Praying for our forgiveness of sins and having lots of faith unto Yahweh. The Sabbath came. He brought his anointing oil, which was pure olive oil, and anointed her forehead. We prayed to Jehovah in Jesus Christ's name, with faith for Jesus to wake her up. She was a Catholic friend. She started to yawn 3 times and woke up. The pastor told us to leave. We called the nurse to tell her she woke up. We left because we did not want to take any credit. We left praising Yahweh for his great miracle of love. She woke up and is still alive. We had prayed earnestly with faith, believing she was going to wake up." This was from a comment posted under Deceived by Pharmakeia Part 4 on YouTube. Blood transfusions. What does the Bible say about blood? Leviticus 3:17 says, quote, "It shall be a perpetual statute for your generations throughout all your dwellings, that ye eat neither fat nor blood. Leviticus 7:26 through 27. Moreover, ye shall eat no manner of blood, whether it be of fowl or beast, in any manner of your dwellings. Whatsoever soul it be that eateth any manner of blood, even that soul shall be cut off from his people. Leviticus 17:10 to 14. And whatsoever man there be of the house of Israel, or of the strangers that sojourn among you, that eateth any manner of blood, I will even set my face against that soul that eateth blood, and will cut him off from among his people. For the life of the flesh is in the blood, and I have given it to you upon the altar to make an atonement for your sins. For it is the blood that maketh an atonement for the soul. Therefore I said unto the children of Israel, no soul of you shall eat blood, neither shall any stranger that sojourneth among you eat blood. Another category of blood defilement, Leviticus 15:19. And if a woman have an issue, and her issue in her flesh be blood, she shall be put apart 7 days, and whosoever toucheth her shall be unclean until the even. Leviticus 15:25. And if a woman have an issue of her blood many days out of the time of her separation, or if it run beyond the time of her separation, all the days of the issue of her uncleanness shall be as the days of her separation. She shall be unclean. Leviticus 20:18. And if a man shall lie with a woman having her sickness, and shall uncover her nakedness, he hath discovered her fountain, and she hath uncovered the fountain of her blood, and both of them shall be cut off from among their people. Apparently, God is very serious about this. These are perpetual, repeated commands and health principles from God with embedded punishment for violators. Do you know how we know that these are not just ceremonial statutes, but actually health principles? Because nature punishes the violators of these laws with disease, as we are about to see. This is not ambiguous stuff. Clearly, God has designated blood as defiling, yet blood transfusions have become an everyday practice. Since God designated blood as defiling, then blood transfusions must also be defiling. It is contrary to God's commands. It is also a violation of natural law. Therefore, there must be natural consequences for this violation of natural law. There always is. So I asked the question online, can blood transfusions cause diseases later in life? Here was the direct answer. Yes, blood transfusions can increase the risk of developing diseases later in life, including certain cancers and autoimmune diseases. Cancer. Studies have shown that blood transfusions can increase the risk of developing hematologic malignancies, including non-Hodgkin lymphoma and liver cancer. Some of these cancers may be caused by carcinogenic agents that are not currently screened for in blood. Autoimmune disease. A prior transfusion, even without infection, can increase the risk of developing an autoimmune disease by 90%. Other diseases. Blood transfusions can also increase the risk of death. Myocardial infarction, really? That's heart attack, stroke, renal failure, and infection. Good grief. Other issues from blood transfusions: bacterial infections, viral infections, allergic reactions. Blood transfusions may save lives in an emergency, yeah, but there may be a high price to pay in the long run. We cannot violate God's natural law with impunity. nature punishes us with disease, suffering, and even death. Is unclean blood made clean by injecting it directly into our veins? Well, that's a no. Question number 2, are we immune to diseases carried in transfused blood? That's another obvious no. Here's a different, unexpected take. This is a quote from one of the pioneers back in that day. A meat diet changes the disposition and strengthens animalism. To educate your children to subsist on a meat diet would be harmful to them. Well, wouldn't this also be true for blood transfusions? Well, here's a verification of this quote. October 15, 2023, the National Association of Medical Doctors, the Journal of Medicine. Here is the article title, Does a Blood Transfusion Pass on the Donor's Personality? Well, we just kind of read that it did. There have been well-publicized stories of people who've had organ transplants describing how suddenly they've experienced personality changes, developing tastes they'd never before had. In the U.S., a 47-year-old woman had a lung transplant from an 18-year-old and developed a craving for beer and fried chicken. Now, blood transfusions, too, are thought by some scientists to have this kind of altering effect on our personality and character. Medical cannibalism is the consumption of parts of a human body, dead or alive, to treat or prevent diseases. Whether we eat or drink or inject or transplant human body parts or fluids into our bodies, nature punishes those who do, even if it is done in the name of benevolent medical science. Well, what about emergencies and war and blood loss and surgery? Has God made provisions for these terrible emergencies? Yes, he has, folks. God has provided at least 4 better ways. Transfusions of coconut water. Number 1. During World War II in the Pacific, between 1941 and 1945, both sides in the conflict regularly used coconut water siphoned directly from the nut to give emergency plasma transfusions to wounded soldiers. It turns out that coconut water is a natural isotonic beverage with the same level of electrolytic balance as we have in our blood. It's the fluid of life, so to speak. Coconut water is nearly identical to human blood plasma, which makes it the universal donor. We do have options. Number 2, drinking coconut water. Previous one was transfusions of coconut water. This one is drinking coconut water. Now, plasma makes up 55% of human blood. By drinking coconut water, we give ourselves an instant plasma transfusion. The remaining 45% of human blood consists of hemoglobin, which is essentially transformed plant blood, chlorophyll. When we consume a drink consisting of 55% coconut water and 45% fresh green leaf juice, we give ourselves an instant blood transfusion. Now, isn't that interesting? Mix 1 tablespoon of spirulina powder with 6 ounces of coconut water, or mix 1 ounce of wheatgrass juice with 6 ounces of coconut water. Fresh is always better. This understanding finally provides intelligent motivation to eat our greens. Chlorophyll is identical to human blood, with one exception. The center element in chlorophyll is magnesium, whereas the center element in blood is iron. Some researchers claim that chlorophyll has the ability to release magnesium from its center and absorb iron, and thus become hemoglobin. Chlorophyll literally becomes human blood. More blood means our body has more ability to disperse oxygen. Number 3, seawater transfusions. Straight seawater has been successfully placed in place of blood plasma from transfusions in emergency naval situations at sea. Reports are that a number of medical doctors in the United States are using seawater in this way to avoid the possibility of transmitting disease from blood transfusions. The fourth option is divine intervention. This is a friend of mine, Angela Christian. She gave me permission to use this. This is what she told me. She says, "When I was a child, I witnessed my mom being miraculously healed through prayer, just minutes before surgery. The best part was that she had been telling the doctors that the Lord was going to intervene, and he absolutely did. It turned out to be a wonderful testimony for the doctors and hospital staff that day. Her doctor had to admit that he had indeed witnessed a miracle. My mama came home feeling great and grinning from ear to ear." This is from a testimony of under Med Missionary Blog, March 1, 2024. Our necessity is God's opportunity. We are to be his witnesses for his glory. This is where God is leading us now. We are not going to be able to hold on to that green cord without this level of faith and experience first. Soon, we will be denied the world's medical care. We will have to treat organ failure, comas, blood loss, and illness with nature's remedies and effectual, fervent prayer exclusively. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Revelation 13, 15 through 17. Already people are being denied surgeries because they refuse vaccines. What's next, folks? It's only going to get worse. All right, the conclusion of the whole matter. Back to Proverbs 14:12. There is a way which seemeth right unto a man, but the end thereof are the ways of death. It is against God's natural law for a man to use somebody else's organs or blood. These are the ways of death, as are the parasitic pharmaceuticals that have fastened themselves into those practices. It is not God's will that a man should pray for someone else's organs or blood. What is God's will is for such a man to seek unto his God, to put away sin, to ask for healing, to ask for God's will, and to surrender to that will. James 5:13 through 16 says, "The effectual, fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much. I am the Lord that healeth thee." Exodus 15:26.